Welcome to the February wrap-up. We have a location change today and a camera that's a little too close. It's about 3 feet away from the previous location, but something over there is making a weird noise and I can't figure it out and I don't want to deal with it. So we're just gonna move slightly into my beautiful mustard colored chair from IKEA. It is truly a godsend and where I spend a lot of time. Too much? No such thing. So today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in February. There were 9 of them, which I'm happy with. It was an increase from January and in a shorter month. As I mentioned in my February TBR, I'm focusing on books by Black authors in honor of Black History Month. So 8 of the books that I read were by Black authors. There was 1 that I did mention in that video by a white author. That's the last book that I read. I was trying to find a way to get around it because that's the book that I read for the buzzword prompt of the color in the title. That was it. And I only had 1, so I was trying to get around it. I was debating reading Precious by Sapphire, which would totally work for the challenge, but I started reading some reviews of it and it seems like it's a pretty divisive book about whether it's good representation or bad representation. So I figured I might stay clear of it and try to do some better representation in the other books that I'm reading. Without further ado, let's talk about the first book. The first book that I read in February is Concrete Rose by Angie. This is my beautiful signed edition. It's beautiful. Unfortunately, I didn't love this. This being Maverick's story, I sort of expected certain things, like Maverick is Star's dad and he's very wise and has a lot of life experience that he sort of passes down to her. But the problem is in this book, he's 17 and just learning all of those lessons that will lead to him being wise. But right now he's an idiot in the way that all 17-year-olds are idiots. He's just kind of reckless and doesn't listen to his mom and lives in the moment, and that was fine. It just wasn't what I wanted going into it after having read The Hate You Give. And all of the characters in here are great. She does a really good job at the family unit. I didn't find it anything super memorable. It also felt kind of plotless. Like there is a plot, but there isn't sort of the driving force that The Hate You Give sort of has. I did read Angie Thomas's other book on the come up this month, so once we get to that, we may have some more things to talk about here to compare the two. The second book that I read was Ring Shout by P. Djèlí Clark. This is a horror novella. I read one review of this that said it either should have been shorter or it should have been longer, which I totally agree with. Depending on the edition, it's between like 130 and 180 pages. It just didn't feel like enough time to get invested in the world building or the characters, or it should have been a short story that was just for shock value, sort of, like just a slasher. Look at my Goodreads review for all of these. They're way smarter than I am in the moment. But I said the first third was 2 stars because it felt sort of like action for the sake of action. And it sort of read like a car chase, which people love car chases. They're totally valid. But when a car chase comes on in a movie, for me, my eyes just sort of glaze over and it just sort of happens. So the first third was like a 2-star. And then the second third started getting really good. We started doing more world building and finding out more about what the monster is and delving into the magic sword, which I did not expect in this book, but there's a magic sword. But then the final third was 4 or 5 stars. Like it ended really well. There was some really interesting discussion of some stuff and some really good horror monster creature stuff. I don't know how to qualify it. It was like creature body horror is what I would say. It was really fun and really well done, and I just sort of wish it had maintained that momentum through the whole thing. There was a lot that I did really like about it, but I feel like horror is so subjective. It's going to be a very personal thing to find something that's 5 stars, so this is still one that I would definitely recommend if you're interested. The next book I read was The Boyfriend Project by Farrah Roachen. This one I almost DNF'd. I read like truly 5 pages and I was like, I'm just not feeling it. And so I went on Goodreads and looked at a couple of reviews and they were all 4 or 5 stars, the top reviews. And so I was like, fine, I'll give it like 20 pages or something. And sure enough, 20 pages later, I was totally in love with it. The main woman, Samaya, finding out that her boyfriend has been dating 2 other people. So she goes down to confront him, and the other 2 women show up, and the 3 of them form an unlikely friendship, and it's very precious. There was a lot that I really liked about this book, especially the love interest Daniel. He was a really interesting character. It helped to subvert some very standard tropes in the romance genre because he's a secret agent. And so like the whole "you lied to me" 3rd act drama is justified in this because yeah, he did lie to her because it's his job. So I thought that was really fun, and their romance was really good. There was some stuff I didn't super love about it. We jumped around a bit too much. There were a couple of pivotal scenes, like them getting together, that were skipped over. And I can't figure out why. The other thing that was really interesting about this book was, so the 3 girls, there's Samaya, Taylor, and London. Samaya is the main of this book, and it was very obvious that they were setting this up for a trilogy, like that each of those girls would get their own books, which is fine, but I did feel like it detracted from this book, especially when the other 2 girls were way more interesting and more charming than the main character of this one. So I think the next one comes out in the summer, and that's Taylor's book, so I'm very excited for that one. It's a double-edged sword where it was a really good idea because now I'm definitely gonna buy your next book and talk about it, but it did lower my enjoyment a little bit of this book. Not that much, that was still 4 stars. Really good. Why am I so bad at saying star ratings? We gotta go back. Previous 2 were both 3 stars. There we go. Easy. The next book that I read was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I can confirm this book is definitely worth all of the hype that it gets. I don't want to say it reads like fiction. It's very narratively driven, I think, is the difference, where they're all like stories that have a beginning, middle, and end. And this book is also every genre you could want rolled into one. Do you want a rom-com? Because this has the most adorable meet-cute story of all time. It's really precious. Do you want a family drama? Because then we can talk about Michelle's family and how they were very poor growing up and her dad having a chronic illness. It also has a coming of age story in it where it talks about Michelle's education and going to college and trying to decide on a career and how her career ends up changing multiple times. I felt like it was really helpful having her articulate all of the things that I had been thinking recently, but it also sort of gave me another quarter-life crisis, which I love. Thanks, Michelle, for that. But the fact that a book could do that to you is, I think, a glowing recommendation. Like, if a book can make you feel enough to go crying to your husband about what am I doing with my life, it's a pretty good book. The one thing I will say about this book, though, is it did kind of make me hate Barack Obama. Because there's this part in it where she talks about how, for Barack, "I'll be home soon" is not an assessment of time. It is a state of mind. So he's like, "I'll be home soon, I just have to run to the gym first." Or, "I'll be home soon, I just have to sign a bill in," or something like that. And that, my #1 pet peeve is punctuality. Michelle is a saint for putting up with that, is what I'm saying. Yeah, if you can't tell, I gave this one 5 stars. If I could give it more than 5 stars, I probably would. Oh yeah, and I didn't just cry at that one part, I cried at like at least 3 separate spots. I do cry a lot though, so maybe that's more about me than it is about her. Damn it, now I'm gonna have another quarter-life crisis. Thanks, Obama. The next book I read was A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole. This is my 2nd book by Alyssa Cole. I read When No One Is Watching last year, and I really enjoyed it. And if I didn't know these 2 were written by the same author, I wouldn't have been able to tell. This is also the latest installment in the "Oops, I read a pandemic book even though I didn't mean to" catalog. Yeah, the main character is an epidemiologist. I think that's what it's called. Why doesn't it say? The other thing that was really interesting about this book was because of the way that the character's relationship progresses, it manages to fit so many tropes naturally. Like, it starts off as a sort of second chance romance, and then it's sort of like a friends to lovers, and then it's like an enemies to lovers, and then there's a fake dating element in there too. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that, like, no matter what your favorite trope is, this book has got it. It's like it was written by a rom-com AI, except way better. I just thought this one was so much fun. I had been a little bit slumpy, but the romance was the perfect thing to get me out of it, and I'm really enjoying Alyssa Cole, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Next up we have She Came to Slay, The Life and Times of Harriet Tubman by Erica Armstrong Dunbar. This is a short book about Harriet Tubman. An interesting format. Let me find some stuff. Pictures are in here, and there's some documents. Has some other pictures of Harriet. It's also got these like infographics. Let me find one. Yeah, here's one. And I thought it was really good. My problem with this is that it couldn't decide if it wanted to be fun or serious. Like, you know, there's a way to do more accessible for younger audiences, sort of. And I sort of figured with the title, She Came to Slay, we were gonna have like a joke somewhere in here, but no, it's pretty much just like straight biography. I think a lot of people just know Harriet as part of the Underground Railroad, and that's a very small portion of her life. She died in 1913, so she was a huge advocate for women's suffrage. That's something that I feel like doesn't get talked about. This is really good. I don't know if this is the book about Harriet Tubman or if there is another alternative out there that could be better, but definitely an incredible woman, and I really enjoyed getting to learn about it. Next up, we have On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. I am very thankful that I wasn't Angie Thomas'd out after Concrete Rose, so I have officially read everything Angie Thomas has written, or at least all of her novels, and this one is the best one by far. It's leaps and bounds above The Hate U Give. The Hate U Give is very different and geared differently. I know in my TBR I was talking about how I didn't love that The Hate U Give felt sort of white affirming, or like it was written for white people to have a glimpse into what it's like to be a black teen these days. And this one, while you can certainly learn a lot about what it's like to be a black teen these days, it doesn't feel like it was written with white people in mind at all. This feels like something that was very personal to Angie Thomas, and I'm so happy that she got to write it. It was so well done. I loved all of the characters in it. I loved how complex everything was. Like, nothing in this book was black and white. I love this book so much, but I'm really struggling to put it into words. Like, I haven't even written my Goodreads description yet. It might be up by now, but I don't know how to articulate what I love about this book, because it's everything. I wanted more of the rapping. Bree, the main character, is a rapper, and so within the first 20% she's done 2 songs, and they were so fun, and I wanted so much more of that, but you basically don't get any more until literally the 95% mark. You get another rap, which is chef's kiss wonders, but there was a long time without it, and all of the plot in the middle there was also excellent, but I wanted more of everything. This book is also 460 pages. Like, she's a chunker, and I flew through it. Like, it doesn't feel long at all. I did do this one mostly as an audiobook. I read a little bit of it, but I found the audiobook narrator not great at first. By the end, I was totally used to it. I don't know if this one necessarily needs to be done as an audiobook. I've heard that it does because the rap has a sort of rhythm that you need, but I didn't find that the narrator especially enhanced that for me. I felt like just reading it, I could have gotten the same thing, but I don't not recommend any format. Just read it. It was great. I'm trying to decide if it's my favorite book of the month. It and Becoming are just, oh, it's a tight race. No shade to The Hate U Give, but like in retrospect, it ain't got nothing on the come up. I'm just so happy with it. Can you tell I liked it? 5 stars. Did I say 5 stars? You know. The next book that I read was And Now She's Gone, and Then She's Gone. Where did she go? Uh-oh, we can't find her. By Rachel Howzell Hall. What is it called? And Now She's Gone. Yeah. So this is a thriller about a private investigator who is trying to find a missing woman while also dealing with her past. I had really high expectations for this book. Like the first bit, I don't know, a percentage, was really good, and I was hoping that it was going to become more twisty as it went along. Like I was hoping for perspectives from the PI and from the missing woman, and that they would sort of weave together, and the PI's backstory would sort of come into it. Like there were a lot of really good building blocks, but I'm really sad that in the end they didn't come together, and it ended up being so convoluted that I'm still not entirely sure what happened. I mean, I know what happened, I understand the ending, but I don't understand how we got from point A to point B. Like I understand the beginning, missing woman, we're trying to find her, and then the climax scene. I don't understand what happened in the middle there. This book is just really confusing, and I tried to do it on audio for a little while, but the writing style is really not suited for that, especially things like there are text messages that aren't formatted so you don't know who's talking ever, and there's so many characters in it, and there's so many women's names. Everyone has a secret identity, and everyone's related to everybody, and because she's a PI, she's interviewing 1,000 people, and it's just really confusing. Do not recommend this one on audio. For most of it, I read the Kindle and the audiobook at the same time. There was a lot that I really liked about this, especially the PI's backstory, and to find out about her abusive ex-husband, and that was all really well done and really tense, really good thrillery stuff that I was hoping would sort of bleed through, but it didn't really end up doing that. It was also really frustrating because the beginning seemed like it was going to have some really interesting racial discussions. There's one part where the missing woman's boyfriend is talking about how he's white and she's black, but they like don't see color, and it like doesn't factor into their relationship, which is a huge red flag. We do not live in a post-racial world. It's definitely something you should talk about, or at the very least acknowledge that your girlfriend is black. That didn't really get delved into that much. It sort of got abandoned, which was too bad. I felt like there were some really good bones there. This whole book was just good bones and no follow through. It also had some really bizarre writing choices. I have quotes that I just need to share with someone. Yeah, this is a good one. This case was Ivy, uncontrollable and tangled, and right then she was a rat without teeth, unable to bite her way through the dark mess that hid who knew what else. People like Noelle were like herpes, around until they weren't, but never really gone. She's obsessed with describing the color of the sky. Like at one point it's a sherbet colored sky, and then here it's lightning the color of crayons, atomic tangerine, cornflower, and laser lemon. A thrill ran through her, like she was wine wasted and owned all the cheese in the world. Oh yeah, more sky descriptions. Dirty blue sky, and then later sky would turn to rose quartz and wafer orange. I want to talk a little bit about spoilers, so I'll put a thing up. Editing me will do it. We trust her. So it'll just be on the screen, and then when it's gone you can come back. But the problem with this was that the climax was boring. We spent the whole book talking about, what's her name? Oh, I can't remember because she has like 9 identities. Great. Grayson is her name for now. She is trying to avoid her abusive ex-husband, and then eventually he tracks her down, and they have this non-confrontation for a bit. He finally tracks her down, and I felt nothing. It was very strange. And then they have this like fight where they stab each other with forks because they're at a diner and that's all they have. And then he's injured in the parking lot, and she goes back inside, and the management calls the police, and then they come back out and he's gone. Well, yeah, like of course he was. Of course he would have gotten away in that amount of time. He wasn't like mortally wounded from a couple of stabs from a butter knife. Like he's fine. No one thought to check on him before the cops got there. That's the end of his storyline until in the epilogue they're like, oh, he's in Mexico because of tax fraud and they're gonna go get him. And it's like, that's not satisfying. That's not what we've been building up to this entire time. The other plotline that's going on is for the case. She's looking for this missing woman. And then it turns out the missing woman was there the whole time. She was impersonating her friend who she had murdered. Oh, and also they casually throw out that she's a serial killer because there's been a bunch of dead bodies in her path, but like nothing's been confirmed, and a bunch of the deaths weren't even like ruled murders. They were just accidental deaths a lot of the time. And so she's like throwing out how this woman is a mastermind without like really explaining how we got anywhere. But the scene that I loved was, so she's at the friend's apartment and that person comes home, and then it's revealed that she's really the missing woman and that she murdered the friend for insurance fraud. Sure, but the reveal of how that happens is very entertaining. She pulled at her hair, and those braids and bangs were now in her hand. Her ponytail, sapphire black and darker than the darkest night, was now free to swing past her shoulders. She dropped the wig and the glasses to the carpet, then pulled off the track jacket and the 2 sweatshirts she'd worn underneath it. She kicked off her Skechers and tugged off the track pants. She tossed those and the cushions she'd stuffed around her thighs onto the heap of clothes. So like, she's revealing her identity for a long time. To undress that much, that's a lot of stuff you gotta do. The PI has a gun in her purse. So like, as soon as that woman takes off the wig, you run for that gun. And especially like, she's trying to pull 2 sweatshirts off. Like, something's gonna get stuck on her big head, or maybe it's just me, and you're gonna have time to reach for your gun and like have a plan. Because this woman is clearly in trouble in some way. No, the PI has seen a dead body in this house already. You should have had your gun out the moment that happened. And she didn't. It was so stupid. I found it was also especially frustrating because she was a private investigator and not a cop. So she like couldn't actually do anything. She didn't have legal right to do a bunch of stuff. It was very frustrating. I know a lot of people really like this book. There was some good stuff in it, but not for me. I gave this one 2 stars. 2 stars feels harsh. It's like a 2.5. If the ending of a thriller isn't thrilling, it's not a good thriller. Hot take. Has music been playing from my computer this whole time? Is that what that is? Yep, there's definitely been music playing from my computer for like the past 30 minutes. I hope that wasn't in the background. If it was, I'm sorry. Please don't copyright me. And the final book that I read this month was Stay Gold by Tobly McSmith. This is the only one not by a Black author. This is written by a trans man, and it's about a trans teen going to high school and trying to pass. I'm holding up the dust jacket here because this is the cover that you get, and under the dust jacket you get this beautiful lemon and this cold spine, and I love it so much, and I'm so upset that this isn't yellow. It's called Stay Gold and it's blue. Is no one else upset by this? Look how pretty this is. It's also very different. The mustard, the lemon is not a good combo. It just makes me happy every time I look at it. This book was great. It was surprisingly fun for a book that handled some really tough topics. I'm still struggling with what to rate this. It's either a 4 or a 5. And I think the reason that I'm hesitating giving it a full 5 stars is because it felt a little too light for all of the heavy topics that were discussed in here. Everything was just a little bit too easy breezy, but I think that's also an asset to it because it is a YA book, gives exposure to a trans teen without being depressing. There was a scene close to the end where things did get a little bit rough, but like the very end is very hopeful and very positive, probably unrealistically so. The one thing I didn't like about it were there felt like a couple of plot lines that were sort of picked up and then abandoned. He has a boss who he grows pretty close with, and they have some sort of interactions around his trans identity, but it's never really delved into, and I felt like that was a missed opportunity because the characters were both so good and I felt like they had such good rapport. And I felt like maybe a little bit too much time was spent on the lady character Georgia, she was great, but I did feel like this should have been Pony's story. Pony's the trans boy. It should have been more his story, and it felt like it was very even. Doing wrap-ups is so strange because the beginning of the month feels like a year ago. Like, the fact that I read Concrete Rose this month feels like a fever dream, despite it only being 28 days ago. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I got some fun stuff planned for March, so go check out my TBR and then check in through the month. The video that I'll have up next week I'm very excited about, so stay tuned for that. I will see you in my next video. Bye!